Welcome to day one of our 2021 Rapid Rehousing Workshop series. Today is going to focus on sort of what are the goals of rapid rehousing in Santa Clara County and some of the basics of planning for housing stability. Before we get into the agenda and broader introductions, I want to introduce myself and my co-facilitators so that you know who's going to be talking to you and with you for the next couple of hours. My name's Eli Hamilton. I am with Home Base. Most of you, many of you are familiar with Home Base, I know, because I recognize a lot of names and a couple faces. We are a nonprofit that's based in San Francisco, and in Santa Clara County, we work with the County Office of Supportive Housing to support homeless housing and service providers across the community. One of the ways that we do that is we offer a series of free provider trainings throughout the year. And the past few years, we have been able to do a set of workshop style trainings specifically targeted to those of you who work in rapid rehousing programs. And that's what we're here to do today and over a couple of days in the next few weeks. We have 3 sessions planned. As I said, I am Eli, and I'm going to let my 2 co-presenters introduce themselves. So Mark, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mark. I also work for Home Base, relatively new to the organization. Happy to be here and excited to meet and work with all of you.
Thanks. Go for it, Bila.
Hi, my name is Bila Lindner, and I also work with Home Base, and happy to be here today and happy to see all of you as well.
Awesome. So as I mentioned, and as hopefully you saw in the registration email we sent out, there are 3 parts to this Rapid Rehousing Workshop series. The first part is going to be covering, we're sort of thinking about this as rapid rehousing in Santa Clara County, because we're going to spend a good chunk of time talking about what are the goals of rapid rehousing and what are we trying to accomplish. And we will start a little bit talking about housing planning for housing stability. And then the second session is going to be around the problem solving and troubleshooting that you all do every day as providers in rapid rehousing programs, working with your clients to overcome those barriers to housing stability. And then the third session, we're going to be partnering with Job Train to bring you a session that will go over the employment programs and work readiness supports that Job Train can offer and how to access them, as well as getting down to some of the basics of how we build relationships with clients and how we recognize and manage our own emotions and connection to the work to make the work both sustainable and also most effective for clients. So we're gonna get into some of the real important emotional foundations of the work and also talk about employment. During this workshop, I want to make a few notes about tech stuff. So closed captioning should be available during this workshop. In order to access that, you're going to see a live transcript button in your Zoom control bar. So if you'd like to follow along in a live transcript, that's available. If you have any questions at any time, it's always appropriate to use the chat to communicate with us. If you have tech challenges, if you have questions about something we're presenting on, we'll always be monitoring the chat. We'll also be pausing to have discussion and asking you questions. We'll have some breakout groups. And at those points, it's also super appropriate and encouraged for you to unmute yourself and share. If we end up having trouble with people talking over each other, we'll help to manage that. But during discussion periods, and definitely for sure in those breakout groups, feel free to unmute yourself and talk with your human mouth. And then again, if you have any tech challenges, you can use the chat function to get a hold of Bila. She's going to be looking out for tech issues. Or you can email us at Santa Clara County COC at homebasecc.org, the email address on the screen, if you get locked out of Zoom or need any other assistance. Okay, so we want to get a sense of who is in the room, and we want you all to be able to get a sense of who are your colleagues in the room right now. So we're going to do some introductions in the chat. go ahead and find the chat function in Zoom. It's in your control bar and it says chat. And in the chat, enter, just type in your name, the organization that you work with, and just in one sentence, let us know, why do you do the work that you do? What motivates you? That can be either what got you into this work, or why do you wake up every morning and go to work at the rapid rehousing program you work with? Excellent. All right, I'm seeing some great introductions. Thank you, Cassandra. Thank you, Nicole. Thanks, Meg. Excellent. All right. Go ahead and keep introducing yourselves in the chat. And folks, take a second to scroll through and see who we're in the room with today. We've got folks from all over the community, all of the agencies that are doing rapid rehousing. And thanks to those of you who are answering that question about why you do this work. I'm seeing that folks enjoy helping people who don't have a voice, helping our clients, love community work. We change lives. Absolutely. What motivates me is to help people in general. Each one, teach one. Excellent. A passion for helping others, help the underserved. I mean, we clearly, and this is no surprise, have a lot of people who are really dedicated to helping other people, changing lives and helping families. Yeah, excellent. To give back to my community. Yeah. Great. Yeah, a lot of passion that you all feel to help other human beings and to help grow and strengthen our community. Excellent. Personal experience of homelessness, being able to get out of it because of programs like we run. Yeah, that's great. And that's a really important thing to bring to the work for sure. All right, thank you so much for that. We're going to be giving you several opportunities to chat and meet each other, and also share your experiences of the work and ideas and strategies you have. So the agenda for this training, we've done introductions, and then we're going to spend a good chunk of time talking about the goals of rapid rehousing and what rapid rehousing success looks like, what we can expect rapid rehousing to do and what we can't. In that section, we are going to be doing some group brainstorming. I'll present a little information, and then Mark is going to lead us through a discussion of that information that's going to involve some breakout groups. Then we're going to have a break, and our second half of the training is going to be about planning for housing success. We're going to go over a little bit of information about what is the process of housing planning look like, what is a housing plan, what does a housing plan look like, and do some group problem solving around some of the challenges that come up when you're housing planning. And then we'll talk about next steps. And our objectives for today are to be able to define some realistic expectations for success in rapid rehousing that align with local community priorities for rapid rehousing. What are our local funders' expectations about rapid rehousing? And what do you as providers, what should you expect of your work? To talk about how to create client-led, housing-focused case plans and what both of those pieces mean, to be client-led and housing-focused. And then just definitely to have a chance for you all to connect with each other, share information with other rapid rehousing providers. So this is going to be heavily a mix between us presenting stuff and us asking you to do work, us asking you to communicate with each other and share your expertise and your experience. Before we get started, are there any questions about what the goal of today is, what we'll be covering, or how to use any of the Zoom features you'll need to use? Let me know in the chat. Okay. All right, not seeing any. We're going to get into our first group brainstorming activity about the goals of rapid rehousing. Yeah, so we're going to do some brainstorming on a tool called Jamboard. And to do this, I think Mark is going to put the link to a Jamboard in the chat. So everybody head on back to that chat. And once we get the link in there, just click that link and it should take you to a blank whiteboard type thing. And Mark, go ahead and share what the Jamboard looks like. All right, so I see we have at least 17 folks joining us in the Jamboard. So if you haven't made it there yet, go ahead and click that Jamboard link and you should be seeing the slide or that's the image that Mark is sharing. A slide that says, what are the goals of rapid rehousing? Great. Seeing we're still getting folks joining us. And if you're not able to get into the Jamboard, that's okay. We can put your answers onto the Jamboard, your answers to this question. So feel free at this point to put it on the Jamboard. To do that, you can click the sticky note icon on the left. And Mark is demonstrating this on the shared screen right now. Find the sticky note icon on the left and write whatever you want to on that sticky note, click save, and it'll show up on the Jamboard. And what we want you to add to the Jamboard is, for you, what are the goals of rapid rehousing? Think about this broadly. Maybe what are the goals of rapid rehousing for our community? On the system level, what are we trying to do? What are the goals that you have with your clients? What are those, what do you want for your clients? What does success look like in your program? Feel free to add one or more sticky notes to the Jamboard. And again, if you can't access the Jamboard or don't want to put your sticky notes on there, you can put your answer in the chat or come off mic and let us know. All right. Yeah, so I'm seeing goals of rapid rehousing, long-term housing stability, stable housing and employment, permanent housing is a huge goal. Housing first. So our goal is to do this in a housing first way, where we're getting our clients housed as quickly as possible. To help people obtain housing quickly, for sure. Self-sufficiency. Yep. To obtain and maintain stable housing, for sure. To find more housing for people who are experiencing homelessness within a month or sooner, right? Help people stay housed. Excellent. Yeah, I like that we're getting to that stability piece. Economic stability, permanent housing and self-sufficiency. Learn how to live sustainably and gain employment / education. Excellent. I'm seeing self-sufficiency again. Awesome. Stabilized income. Keep them coming. This is great. And I'm seeing, and I think we're all seeing patterns emerge, right? It's definitely about housing stability. It's also about how quickly are you getting people into housing? And then once you've gotten someone into housing, increasing income, maintaining that, or getting economic stability, and all of those things that are necessary to help people stay housed. Awesome. Housing without barriers. Yep. Does anybody who isn't able to access the Jamboard have thoughts that they want to put out there? Start with a stable place to stay. I see. All right. Connect to resources and help develop new skills and tools. Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. So we can see from this, I think that you all as a provider community are already like really aligned in what you're trying to do. We have a pretty good shared understanding of what we're trying to do. And let's see, to have more homes available. I like this as a system goal to have more homes available around the whole Santa Clara County for people experiencing homelessness or safe places. Yeah, I mean, I think that's it's absolutely a goal of the system to increase housing that's available and affordable. Teaching tools for money management, resources to sustain, limit barriers to program enrollment. Yeah. All right. If you have burning ideas, you can keep sharing on that Jamboard. But Mark, I'm going to take over the share. All right. Home-based folks, am I sharing the right screen? Great. Okay, so we wanted to do that activity because A, it's a good primer for what we're going to talk about in your brains, and B, because there are a lot of goals of rapid rehousing, right? That was a lot of stuff you all put out there. And there were definitely themes of getting into housing quickly, of housing stability, of identifying some of those things that can help people maintain housing stability and stay housed and end homelessness permanently. And it's a lot. It's a big universe of things. What we're going to do next is walk through just the basics of what is rapid rehousing, and then what do we know from research about how rapid rehousing works? Because one of the things I think we want to one of the themes of today is how do we narrow in on goals? How do we narrow in on goals as providers? And how do we help our clients narrow in on those goals that are the most closely tied to addressing housing stability and access to housing? So just to get us all on the same page, what we're talking about, rapid rehousing is a program model that can vary in terms of the length of assistance, the types of things you can pay for. But all rapid rehousing, particularly all rapid rehousing in our community, is focused on providing support for housing identification, so locating housing that a client can access, providing rent and move-in assistance so that the client can pay for that housing, and providing case management and connections to services and resources that will help the client stabilize in that housing and be able to stay housed. So every rapid rehousing program has those three core components.
Eli, just to interrupt really quickly, you're doing the presenter view right now.
Ah, great. Thank you. Is that better? Great, thank you. Because what's the point of me being here if you can just read my notes and train yourselves? Okay, so right, so those are the core pieces of rapid rehousing. We're finding housing, we're paying for housing, and we're doing everything that is necessary for each individual client to give them the best chance of staying in that housing. So then what do we know about how rapid rehousing works and what it can do? Well, one of the sources of information we have about rapid rehousing is you all, right? We can ask you what works, what doesn't, what are your clients achieving, and what are the barriers. Another source of information is research, and we happen to have a few pieces of national research, large-scale studies that have been done, not in the past couple of years, but back prior to 2016 and 2015, that I think are interesting. They're not the whole story and they're not specific to our community, but they're very interesting. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what we can learn from these particular pieces of research. So one is an evaluation of HUD's Rapid Rehousing Demonstration Program. This was published in 2016. The study followed 500 households in the Rapid Rehousing Demonstration Program who were served across 23 sites across the country. And they tracked outcomes at 12 months after exit from the program. The other is another large-scale HUD study called the Family Option Study. This followed over 2,000 families that were split up into 4 study groups. 1/4 of these, one study group, was assigned directly in a straight path to rapid rehousing that lowered all the barriers for those families. They were just directly enrolled in rapid rehousing. And the other 3 study groups got different types of assistance. So some got long-term vouchers, some went through the usual care, where they might have gotten rapid rehousing, but they had to wait for a referral, or they got transitional housing, or they stayed in shelter. So there were 4 different approaches in 12 communities, and they followed folks for 3 years after they enrolled in the study. And then we've also referenced a sort of summary, a compilation of rapid rehousing research that the Urban Institute published in 2015. The Urban Institute summary references these 2 big, large-scale studies I just talked about, but they also pull in data from SSVF, from different things that communities have done across the country. And when we share the slides from this training, you'll have access to those links so you can dig into them. But I'm going to present this as just the key takeaways across all of that research that I think are particularly of interest. So what we see across this research is that certain things rapid rehousing is consistently pretty good at. Housing placements tend to be high. A high percentage of folks, 80% or more, typically get housing while they're enrolled in a rapid rehousing program. Returns to homeless systems tend to be low. That means if someone exited to permanent housing, then only between, in these studies, 6% and 17% returned to a homeless system of care after exit. Now, 17% is obviously on the high end, 6% is on the low end. But overall, that means the majority of people who were exiting rapid rehousing programs to permanent housing were not coming back to shelter or transitional housing or another homeless serving program in that community. And then in terms of returns to homelessness in particular, what a couple of these studies, especially the large scale ones, found was program design and the particular housing market in that community really matter. There was big differences in outcomes, and the differences in outcomes were related to how was the program operated and where was the program operating, where was it located. In one of the large-scale studies, there was a strong outcome that employment and income gains did happen, but they tended to be modest. Family challenges remained high in the studies that looked at what are your challenges now after exiting the rapid rehousing program. In the rapid rehousing demonstration program study, 70% of folks who were in the study worried about food instability at 12 months after they exited rapid rehousing. 57% still struggled with rent. And housing instability in terms of mobility remained high. While we didn't get a whole bunch of people coming back into the homeless system of care, again, the rapid rehousing demonstration project large-scale study found that only about 24% of the people who went through a rapid rehousing program remained in the unit that they were assisted in originally. So we had about 3/4 of folks moving again within a year or so after they exited the program. So that housing mobility remained high. Okay. In the context of that, I want to look at Santa Clara County outcomes because I think they really align, right? We can see in Santa Clara County, this is a data that shows calendar year 2018 in blue, 2019 in orange, 2020 in gray. We can see that for rapid rehousing as compared to transitional housing or just straight shelter, or the system as a whole, we have much higher rates of exits to permanent housing, people who got housed during the program and then were in housing when they exited. And we can also see that our returns to homelessness, which measures the percent of people who were in housing when they left your program, who then showed up later at a shelter or a transitional housing program or another rapid rehousing program, back in HMIS, back in our system of care. Returns to homelessness within 6 months, within a year, within 2 years from our rapid rehousing programs is all within that national sort of what the national research showed, which was sort of 6 to I think actually 19%, right in there. And 17% that's people who are returning to homelessness, but that also means 83% of people did not come back to our system of care. This is not a perfect measure of returns to homelessness, but it does show us that a big chunk of people who we're all serving don't have to come back and ask for assistance in our community. So what does this mean? I think it means pretty much, what I think the rapid rehousing workshops in the past have said, and what we've talked about in the past, which is rapid rehousing reduces the length of time that people are unhoused, reduces the experience of homelessness. And in that, it minimizes the negative impacts that people experience when they're unhoused, right? People are getting housed, and that is good. That is so important, because when people are housed, they can better access the resources and have the time and space and the safety and stability that they need to address other stability factors in their life. It's easier to get a job. It's easier to access healthcare. It's easier to, feel safe and find mental health supports when you're in housing. But we also have to recognize what rapid rehousing is not going to do that maybe we wish we could do. I think we can see in our work and in the research that rapid rehousing is not a tool for us to eliminate poverty. It's not going to you and your jobs are not going to magically create affordable units. It can sometimes seem like we're asking you to do that. We know you're not going to be able to do that. And you're not going to be able to ensure that eliminate housing mobility for every client. And you don't necessarily have the magic power to ensure that people aren't going to be rent burdened, because we are living in a community with an incredibly tough housing market. And most people who are renting in Santa Clara County who are housed and renting are rent burdened. Like, it's a huge, I don't know about most, but it's a huge percentage, right? And so what this means for us is that what we see you trying to do is giving every client that you work with the highest likelihood, the best chance at the greatest stability that they can get, given the resources that you can connect them to, and the support you can give them, and the barriers and the strengths that they have. Every client should get the best chance that they can get at the greatest amount of stability, with a real priority for having that housing connection, getting people into housing, and addressing any potential barriers for housing stability. Resource connections are key, because the rapid rehousing assistance is going to go away. It's time limited. So connecting people to stuff in the community that was going to be there for them in the long term is important. Thinking broadly about housing options is important. Thinking about, what are all of the options that I can bring to my client? And they're not all going to work for every client, and not every client's going to be into them, but things like all of the affordable housing wait lists that you can get someone on, even if they're not going to pay off for 3 or 4 years. That means talking about shared housing, talking about, is there housing in a nearby community that might be lower cost? Are there other neighborhoods that you would consider living in? And then, of course, income is a central conversation. Because it's hard, it needs to happen soon. It needs to start early, and it needs to be an area of focused support. It is, income supports are housing supports. So those are all of our takeaways. But we want to give you all a chance to ask any questions that you have, and also to have a little bit of conversation about that. So, Mark, I'm going to pass to you for that section.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Eli, for that great presentation. I'm going to give folks just a couple moments to digest all the insightful information that Eli shared. I'm going to ask some questions in what we're calling the large group, meaning this room. So while everyone is here together, there's also going to be some time in just a little bit to have some conversation in breakout rooms. And I'll go over the instructions on that in a little bit as well. But to start off with, just thinking about some of the information that Eli presented on relatively recent studies on rapid rehousing, how surprised were you about the presentation? So we're going to do something some of you might be familiar with called fist to 5 if you have your video on. Fist to 5 means, if you can see my video, you can put up a fist for 0, even though it says here scale 1, I forgot to put the 0, all the way up to 5. So 5 would be very surprised. Let's say fist or 0 is not surprised. So based on your experience and the work that you do in Santa Clara and whatever prior experience you have in this area, so how surprised were you with some of the findings in those relatively recent studies that Eli shared? And of course, if you don't have your video on, feel free to plug that into the chat. So if you all can do that really quick. So again, 0 is you're not surprised at all. That kind of jives with your experience. 5, meaning you're very surprised. I see some folks on video. Thank you for throwing the numbers up. I see a 1, I see a 3. In the chat, it looks like a lot of 1s, 2s, and 3s. So far, we're not seeing any 4s or 5s, which is fine. That means that maybe some of the research that Eli shared you're already familiar with, or just your experience kind of jives with that. Just give you another moment. All right, thank you folks for responding to that. So it looks like some people are mildly surprised, maybe we can put it that way, not super surprised. But now I want to give you an opportunity to provide a little more information, a little more data with those numbers. So you have 2 ways to respond to this question. You could type into the chat, but I'm also looking for a couple people to elaborate verbally. So if you're willing to do that, please, after I read the question, feel free to unmute yourself and take a minute or 2 to speak on the question. So the question is, what is one thing that surprised you about the presentation? Again, what is one thing that surprised you about the presentation? Feel free to throw that in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself and elaborate, I would really appreciate that, just so everyone can hear about your experience and your thoughts on that one bit of the presentation. So I'm gonna give you all a moment or 2 to throw in stuff into the chat and or speak out and unmute yourself.
I thought it was cool how they threw in the price difference for Santa Clara County when compared to other areas. I've seen a couple of trainings where we were so different from their rental market, and just what they propose we do, we've done. It's too expensive in the end, but to hear today it being talked about, it's cool.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. I forgot to mention, Daryl, do you mind just introducing yourself, your name, and your organization?
Oh, sorry. Daryl Williams from Home First and the Rapid Rehousing Program.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So it was interesting to see, or surprising to see some of the pricing information in the area. Were other folks also surprised about that? Feel free to respond in the chat and or unmute yourself. If there are no responses to that one, I'm gonna probably read off a couple in the chat. So the fact that the number is so high for people who are worried about food stability, for sure. Thank you for sharing that, Sonia. I thought the numbers re-entering homelessness would be a bit higher. Okay, so actually surprising that they weren't higher than the numbers we're bearing out in the presentation. Got it. Thank you, Claire, for sharing that. And feel free, if I'm reading your response from the chat, feel free if you want to unmute and elaborate on that. We'd really appreciate it. So we have another comment. I'm surprised about the percentage of number of people, how the people that are housed then go back to the shelters. I'm not sure if I'm reading that correctly. I'm surprised about the percentage of people, number of people of how the people that are housed then go back to the shelters.
Yeah, so that returns to homelessness, returns to the system number.
Got it. Thank you, Andrea, for that comment. The different housing placement retention thresholds for various programs and how these different programs performed comparatively. And then I'm surprised to hear that 3/4 of clients are likely to move again after exiting the program. Thank you all for sharing in the chat. Anybody else want to just, maybe one more person, if you want to elaborate either from someone in the chat or if you haven't shared yet, feel free to unmute. Just anything that surprised you about the presentation.
Hey, Mark here from Home First. It's Jose. So one thing that surprised me actually was the success rate for rapid rehousing compared to other initiatives in ending homelessness. So very, very catered to our program in specific here and how rapid rehousing is one of the leading, at least projects to end homelessness. So that was a bit of a surprise for myself.
Awesome. Thank you, Jose, for sharing that and for introducing yourself. A great observation. If you have more things to share about this, don't worry, we're gonna do breakout rooms in a second. So if you want to even maybe continue just a little bit this conversation, you could do that in the breakout rooms. But thank you all for responding to this question. We're gonna transition. I'm gonna give you some instructions about breakout rooms. So if we could advance the slide. And so if you've never done breakout rooms before on Zoom, don't worry, we'll try to give you all the instructions and the tools that you need, and feel free to ask questions in the chat. For the breakout rooms, it would be great if you are able to turn on your video, because there's going to be a smaller group there, so it'd be nice to kind of see each other's faces, again, if you're able to. You're going to self-select roles once you get into your breakout room. There's just 2 roles. One is a facilitator, and facilitator is just going to make sure the conversation goes smoothly. Everyone has a chance to contribute. Maybe just be a little mindful of time. You'll also see a countdown of time, or we'll send out alerts as to how much time you have left in the break room. And then the other role is recorder. Really, this person's role is just to make sure you share out the activity product. I'll go over the activity in just a little bit, but there's just a product that you're going to share out. If we don't have enough time, I'll just ask you to paste that product into a document, and I'll give you information later. Also important, before you go into the breakout rooms, Byla has graciously put a link into the chat. Look into the chat right now, if you would. Open up that link. It says breakout instructions. You're going to need those instructions open when you go into the breakout, so that you have everything in front of you when you're there. Next slide, please. And when you're in the breakout rooms, there's going to be there's an agenda that you'll kind of follow. You'll be there for about 22 minutes, and so the first couple minutes, you're just going to transition and then select roles. Again, however you all want to decide in the rooms who wants to play each of those roles. Then you'll do introductions. If you look in the instructions document, there's some more detailed information about how to do introductions. There's going to be a group discussion question. You have about 6 minutes to discuss that. And then there's an activity called Collective Definition of Rapid Rehousing Success. You'll have 10 minutes to do that activity. Again, if you open up the breakout instructions, you'll find all of the information you'll need to be able to do the discussion and the activity in the breakout rooms. And so we're about to release you out in a moment. If you have any questions about breakout rooms, feel free to throw them in the chat. There's also a button you can hit when you're in the breakout room if you all are realizing that something's unclear. There's a help button. You'll see it in the toolbar. You can hit the help button and one of us, we will jump into the room to your aid and hopefully answer any questions that you have. And then if for whatever reason you're not sure where you landed or what's going on, you can always come back to the main room where one of us will be, and we can give you further instructions from there. So with that, and hopefully you've opened up the instructions for the breakout already, we're going to send you to your breakout rooms.
All right, Mark, I'm going to let you take over the share. Go for it.
For sure. Welcome back, everyone, from break. Hopefully you feel a little energized so that we can finish strong. I'm going to share a screen really quick. Hopefully this works. Do I have the right screen on?
You're good.
Awesome. So thank you all for participating in the breakout rooms. A couple of us popped in and out just to check to see if y'all needed anything, and it sounded like the conversation was rich and that you all were sharing a lot of your experience with each other. So that's great. Hopefully you got to network a little bit too, if there were people that you did not know yet. And so I'm sharing a document where the recorders, thank you to the recorders who volunteered to take on that role, where you pasted your definitions for rapid rehousing success. Just going to take maybe a minute to allow folks to see everyone's definitions. This is something that we can also share via email as a follow-up after, if this is something you find valuable. But more than anything, hopefully the conversation, the discussion you were having in your groups was valuable. So I'm just going to quickly read off each of the definitions. Room 1, rapid rehousing means building a trickle-down support system from agencies to staff members to clients to help create resources towards stable living within the homeless communities. Right on. That's great. Thank you for that. Room 2, Team 2's definition of rapid rehousing success is assisting clients to obtain constant, stable housing while addressing barriers clients may have. Excellent. Room 3, rapid rehousing success means placing participants in housing first, then working with them to break down barriers by creating smaller, achievable goals for post-program housing stability, self-sufficiency. Good job, Group 3. And then now room 4, rapid rehousing success means helping clients become self-sufficient, gain economic independence, learn how to locate, connect resources, and develop life skills. And last but not least, the goal, this is room 5, the goal of rapid rehousing is to help empower individuals, households build self-sufficiency, independence by incorporating life skills and resource navigation, parentheses, community integration for long-term housing retention. Great job, everyone. There's a lot of overlap in the different definitions, but a lot of subtle differences. So I encourage you, if you haven't kind of pour through them a little bit, please do that. And we'll also send these out as a follow-up. Thank you, everyone, for participating in the breakout activity and discussion. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then pass it over to Baila.
All right. I hope you all enjoyed that activity. So now that we've talked about the goals of rapid rehousing and come up with some collective definitions of the success in rapid rehousing programs, we're going to focus on housing stability plans, which are just one of the tools that you can use to achieve those successful outcomes we just defined together. So next, we're going to talk about what is a housing stability plan. A housing stability plan is a roadmap, essentially, for you and your client that sets forth a detailed step-by-step plan for obtaining and maintaining permanent housing. So it's essentially a document that's going to keep you and your client organized and also going in the same direction towards the same goals. And I heard a little bit of this sort of theme being brought up in a few of the definitions. So I was very happy to hear that you guys are already on the same street with me on this roadmap. So next slide, please. Housing stability planning principles. So the details of each plan that you're going to create will be different depending on the client and their goals, but there are some principles that should underlie every single housing stability plan that you create. First of all, each plan should take a housing first approach. I think we're all pretty familiar with what that means, but essentially it's adhering to the philosophy that all clients are housing ready, right then and there, regardless of their income level, whether or not they're sober, mental health status, or other circumstances they are facing. You want to house them rapidly as soon as possible and take that housing first approach with them. Plans should empower clients to achieve their goals. So what that means is that your work with a client puts them in the driver's seat, right? You are there as the support person, but they're the ones who are really driving the work forward with regard to your housing stability planning process. Plans should all be driven by client choice. So they should be based on your client's goals, and they should be supportive of whatever the housing choices are that your clients want to make. Plans need to be individualized and flexible. So meaning that they take into account your client's individual strengths and whatever barriers they may have to obtaining and maintaining housing. And they also need to be flexible, meaning that they're responsive to any changes of circumstance in your client's life. So able to, switch up the plan, change the goals around depending on what's happening. And lastly, the overarching goal of all housing stability plans is resolving your client's housing crisis. So again, this is not a life stability plan. This is not a stability plan that addresses every single goal your client has. Every single part of this plan is really aimed towards achieving housing stability and resolving the client's crisis of experiencing homelessness. Next slide, please. Why are housing stability plans important? Because of, as we have discussed, and as you all know, this work can be very hard. So creating a plan can help make things easier for both you and your client. And how do they do that? Plans break down large, intimidating housing goals and put them into smaller, more attainable steps. And I think that was echoed in some of the rapid rehousing definitions that we heard earlier. Breaking the plans down into these smaller steps makes the process less overwhelming and daunting for both you and your client. And also having these smaller interim goals gives you and your client more opportunities to celebrate successes, which can build confidence for your clients and really keep people motivated to keep going towards that big goal of obtaining housing. Plans also set clear goals and responsibilities for everyone involved so they know what they're working on and why. That'll help make expectations clear so there's no room for miscommunication. Or less room for miscommunication with your clients. Housing stability plans also provide agreed upon timelines, so timelines that everyone can work with, and a way to track progress that keeps both you and your client accountable for every step along the way. And last of all, housing stability plans will help focus your role as a case manager on the specific housing related tasks that you have. Without this kind of focus, I think that it's easy to lose sight of your purpose in helping rehouse people. It's really easy to end up feeling overwhelmed by all of the extra responsibilities you may feel like you need to take on to help your client. So the housing stability plan will really help you focus on your role and how you can be a support person with your client or for your client with regard to housing issues. Next slide. When is the plan created? Right away, as soon as possible. As soon as you meet your client, you're going to want to start this planning process. The earlier you get started on the plan, the sooner you can start taking on the tasks that are going to be necessary to house your client. Okay, who develops the plan? The case manager, so you and your client are going to develop the plan together, but you both have very distinct roles in that planning process. So your client is going to lead the process. They're the ones taking the initiative. Your client is going to be the one setting the goals. Again, this is part of being client-centered, and it also just works better. When people come up with their own goals, they're doing what they want to do, not what they're being told to do. And remember, these are housing-focused goals, so you may have to do some redirecting of your client to make sure that the goals are related to obtaining housing. Clients decide what would help them obtain their goals. So they decide what services they're going to be participating and what connections to resources are going to be helpful to them along the way as well. And your role as the case manager is to support the follow through on those goals, right? So helping them problem solve if there are any bumps in the road, helping encourage them, setting up regular check-in meetings to talk about things that are going on and to help with accountability. Also your role to share information about options and resources, what kinds of housing is out there, what kind of resources are available to help stabilize people once they're in housing, and also connecting people to those resources and services. Okay, next slide, please. All right, and what belongs in a housing stability plan? It really depends on how detailed you want your plan to be. And a lot of this is going to depend on if there's a particular template that you're working with. Many agencies have their own templates. So you're going to want to check with your managers, your agency about whether they already have a template that they want you to use. But at a minimum, these plans should really include the client's main housing stability goal. So for example, I want to move into a studio apartment in, X neighborhood in San Jose that's close to a grocery store or something along those lines. A list of the steps that need to be taken to achieve that goal. So for example, I'm going to need to get my identification. I'm going to need to reach out to landlords, sort of those individual steps that are going to lead to that main goal. You're going to need to have the time frame for completing each step, who is responsible for each step, whether it's going to be the case manager or the client. And then you're going to want to do some sort of assessment of your client's housing related strengths and barriers. And this is very important because it's going to help guide your planning process and make clear what needs to be done to achieve the main housing goal, right? So you're figuring out what are those barriers, and that'll help you determine what interim tasks are going to need to be handled. And in terms of the time frame for these plans, they can focus on goals that help clients obtain housing, right? So things like calling a certain landlord or filling out a certain rental application. They can also focus on goals that help clients maintain housing later on. So you may have a housing stability plan right now when you first meet your client that's focusing on the early part, and then amend the plan later once someone is housed to add things like set up automatic payments for utilities, create a crisis contingency plan, things along those lines. And plans can and should be reviewed and modified as clients make progress and goals change. So again, this is a living document. It's changing all the time as your client is, checking off those tasks and achieving their goals. Next slide. Okay, so just to give you a visual example of what one of these plans can look like, this is an excerpt of a plan that is used in the COC. As you can see, the plan has sort of a brief assessment section in the beginning that will help whoever is using this form figure out what issues might impact their client's housing search. It asks about possible services or supports that they might need. Then it lists the main goal with the action steps to achieve that goal below. And each step has who is responsible and the target date. So that's, pretty basic sort of housing stability plan. And we can send out these templates as well so that you have them. But again, this is just an excerpt of one of them. And next slide, please. And this is another template that I believe is used by the city of San Jose's rapid rehousing program. I could be wrong about that, but it is a template that is in use within the COC. And as you can see, this one has been filled out. So it's an example of a template that's been filled out by somebody. And you can see that they have housing goals, employment goals, and financial goals. So again, all the goals on here don't have to necessarily be just the housing goal. But as you can see, all of the goals, even the employment and financial goals, all relate back to the housing goal, right? Each one of them refers to how that is going to help them obtain the two-bedroom apartment that they want. So again, these two examples are just the examples, that we have to share with you today. But again, your agency may have a template that they want you to use. So just, again, check in about that. All right. So I wanted to take a moment here to focus on the assessment part of the housing stability planning process, because as I mentioned before, knowing what your client's specific needs are that's going to inform your planning process. And obviously you're going to be doing some of this during whatever your intake process is. If you ask questions of your clients to get to know them better, or you have a formal assessment that you do during your intake process, you're going to know a lot of that stuff. But this slide just includes a subset of questions that you may want to consider for the purposes of drafting your housing stability plan. So for example, what resources does your client have? What is their income? Do they have work experience that they can rely upon? What social supports and networks are they connected to? What barriers interfere with a client's ability to regain stable housing? So for example, if a client has been involved with the criminal legal system and that's a barrier for them, how thinking about, can this be addressed through something like a rehabilitation service or help with records expungement? What supports will the client need to move in and maintain stable housing? So for example, are they going to need access to a computer so that they can do an online housing search? Thinking through some of those things. And also, how well can the client solve problems and access services independently and or with support? I think this is a really important one as well, because it speaks to how involved you are going to need to be, how much support your client is going to need in this process. Okay, next slide, please. All right, and now I want to spend a moment to talk about how to help your client identify their housing goals. I know it seems really obvious. You ask your client, where do you want to live? And then they tell you. But this is going to be a little bit, I'm going to encourage you to have a little bit more of a conversation with your client about, to explore some of the different factors that can go into housing choice so that they think about it a little bit more and you have a little bit more information as well. Obviously, where would your client like to live is a huge one, but also what type of housing arrangement would they prefer? Do they want to live in a large building or a small building? Do they want to live alone? Do they want to live with other people? Do they want to have, neighbors close by? Is there anywhere the client wants to avoid, any particular neighborhoods? Are there any concerns about intimate partner violence or other safety issues in certain areas where they should avoid? Are there any places that they're not allowed to be because perhaps they're on parole or probation? Where does the client have a network of family and or friends that are nearby for them to connect to? Also, what was the last place where the client lived that worked well? And maybe thinking through with them, what was it about that situation that worked well? And can we try to replicate that in your next apartment, in your next home? Has the client had a lease before? If so, how did that go? Maybe think about trying to plan ahead to avoid any issues that arose last time, or if there was a particular thing about the relationship with the landlord that worked well, trying to replicate that going forward. And also, does the client have any concerns about moving into their own place? And this is a very important question because a lot of the questions that I've already listed have to do with external factors. So how have other people reacted to your client in housing, or how have other situations like lease, the existence of leases and so on and so forth, or neighbors, or financial issues impacted your client's housing stability. But this question really gets to, how does your client want to feel in their housing? And do they have any concerns? Are there any fears that they have about, being on a lease, being in a certain neighborhood, any particular underlying issues that they may be facing when they're entering housing? And that's really going to set the stage for you to help them plan about long-term housing stability, but also make sure that whatever housing they're going into is a good fit for them. So again, checking in with not just what are the external factors bearing down on your client, but what's happening inside that might be bringing up issues about, if they're turning down housing, trying to get to that, or if they're, focusing on one particular type of housing, trying to understand where they're coming from. Okay, so that is the end of the discussion about housing stabilizing planning. And now we are going to do a very, very exciting activity, because we've been talking about how to create housing stability plans, how important they are, what they look like, how to help guide your clients in developing one. But what about when challenges arise during this planning process? Because challenges always arise, right? So that's what we're going to think about in this activity that we're going to do again on Jamboard. So the first thing that I would like for you to do is to open up Jamboard again. And I think Mark has put the slide, the link in. All right. And if you could go to slide 2, and Mark, I don't know if you want to go ahead and share your screen. All right. So.
And for folks who are on the Jamboard, to navigate to slide 2, which is what we're looking at, if you go to the very top of your screen, there's those 2 arrows, the left arrow, the right arrow. Yeah, you can switch back and forth and find slide 2, what makes this process challenging.
So we would love for you to right now use those sticky notes to answer that question. What is challenging about doing this sort of planning, doing this housing stability planning with your client? It can be about the challenges that you have with goal setting, communicating about housing stability planning, task time management. Just let us know, what are the challenges that you have when you're doing this. We'll give you a few minutes to fill that out.
And similar to earlier, if you are not able to access the Jamboard for any reason, feel free to throw a comment into the chat and we'll make sure to paste it on the Jamboard for you.
I love the visual representation of motivation turned upside down. It's very clever.
Yeah, lots of good stuff here.
Yeah, I'm seeing some major themes here too, of follow through, feelings of motivation, which I think I really like the perspective of challenge is to challenge for clients to transition from survival mode to thinking about long-term stability, which could present as lacking motivation, but just that switching from how am I gonna find a place to exist tonight to thinking about long terms is rough.
Mhm. Okay. All right, so what we are going to do now is we are going to go into breakout rooms again, and we're going to work together to try to brainstorm sort of how would you address some of these challenges. So we are going to, in each breakout room, address 3 of these challenges and come back together and share our responses.
Yeah, and we've pulled out the challenges that are, like, as you can see, there's a lot of recurring thoughts. And in the breakout rooms, they're going to be facilitated breakout rooms. So we're just going to split you in 2. And I'm going to walk folks through 2 or 3 challenges, and Bila's going to walk folks through 2 or 3 challenges. But you will have a facilitator in there. But to make that happen, I just need to edit my groups a minute. Okay, we'll see y'all in breakouts. Folks, thanks for that breakout discussion. I'm going to do a quick run through of the Jamboards. And actually, we're going to just make sure that you have the link to the Jamboard when we send out materials from this training. As you can see, there was a lot of discussion and a lot of ideas and strategies that other folks are using for these barriers. And so this Jamboard will exist. It will be there for you to go and reference. And you'll have the link to it. We'll send it out with the materials to the training. So the last thing we want to ask you to do is please fill out our feedback survey. There's a link in the chat right now. We will also send the link out in the follow-up email when we will send the slides and all of that. But we really would love if you would click on that link right now and complete that survey, because it lets us know what we're doing well and how we can improve. And we really do make concrete changes to how we do these trainings based on your feedback. So that link is in the chat now. Go ahead and open that up. And otherwise, we hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for spending this time with us.